Okay, now that that's done, you know, farming videos, as it be. What next? Because that is currently what the stream title is for. I just did them both. Next. I have to think. I have options. Oh, by the way, I figured out this game has pretty accurate locomotion. Like their feet on different elevations. Look at that. It's not like giga perfectly accurate, but it has locomotion with steps and shit, which was cool. I found that out the other night. That was dope. Let's see. Let's see. We did this. We also did... We also did this. I gotta think. Saving that for later. Gotta get Changli for this. I have to get Changli for this. Saving this for later because I don't want to do another tier list this soon. Saving this possibly for later. It depends. Well, you know what? Screw it. Let's see. Answer my call, you bitch. Inoni desu ka? Justin. Answer my call. Can I stop fat fingering that key? Like, seriously, Jesus Christ. So we're just going to game crash after first shutdown system reinstalling see if it's better. Right. I remember that. You just said that not too long ago. Oh, ZZZ General. Hold on, I gotta fix this. Zen's Zone 0. Event. Yes. This is, can I not follow the channel unless I'm on mobile? Mobile? Ah, I can follow announcements. Got you. Oh, I need to make a, hold on, I need to make a channel. Let's see. Boom. We're gonna call this ZZZ updates. And then we're going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do ZZZ updates right there. Cool. So there's that, and then I can't sadly put the events tab in there. For some reason, it won't let me follow it. Oh well. Bro is not answering my calls. What a bitch. What a actual bitch. Ow. I am actually curious to see if my dungeon is better than my rover at this point. Even though my rover is level 70 and ascended up. S6 dungeon's so goddamn broken, it's absurd. This piece is bad. This piece does not need to be on the character at all. So far, this piece is looking okay. This piece is good enough, right? Crit rate and a bunch of buffs. Crit damage, skill damage bonus, attack percent, solid attack percent piece. This piece so far looking okay. I would love if it rolled crit rate and crit damage, obviously. And then this piece is fine. Crit damage, crit rate. I can't ask for much better. So Danjin, 56%, 200%. 1100 attack. Not like the most amazing, but as a 4-star at level 60, the stats are not, they're not terrible. Not at all. And the way that she plays with her sequences and everything, realistically, her damage output's going to be much higher than that. Attack increase by 30% more attack. So she's going to be at, what, 1300 realistically after doing that, as long as I don't get hit. Damage dealt outright increased by 20%, so much more damage output. Ult damage bonus, which is whatever. More crit rate, which puts her at, like, instead of 56%, it's going to put her at, what, 70% crit rate when she's not doing her heavy attack, and when she does do her heavy attack. Havoc damage bonus, another 30%, and Chaos Cleave, more attack percent, so just more attack percent. My Danjon's probably better than my Havoc Rover because of the buffs she gives herself on S6. It's pretty crazy. Aha! I thought of something. I thought of one we can do. I'm so smart. Big brain. I talked about this last night to myself for 2 hours. Okay. I'll tell you right now why tier lists in this game are wrong. Okay, I'm on Pridewin right now. I love Pridewin. This website is great for every single game they cover. Amazing website. I cannot glaze this site enough. The people who run this, the people who put in the time and effort to calc all this shit, I love you guys. You guys are actually amazing. This tier list, though, is slightly inaccurate. I do want to go over this for a minute. Obviously, we have our DPSs. Jinshi, Gion, called Charo. If my computer wants to, not lag while I do this. Thank you. Called Charo, Encore, Havoc Rover, and like Danjon, although I'm not going to talk about Danjon because realistically she's probably a tier 0 DPS at S6. Just straight up, her buffs are insane. Chishia and everybody else. I want to talk about this for a minute because I think the main DPS rankings are just genuinely wrong. The way they have their calculations done, the way that they do DPS in rotation time, right? It's different than just straight DPS. And we need to talk about this. We absolutely need to talk about this. So the way that it works is in a 13.5-second rotation time, Jinshi's hitting for a lot of damage, which for the time it takes is an effective, 43,000 DPS on this build. Lustrous Razor, all this stuff, these predisposed stats. Fire Truck, can you stop it? Thank you. Anyways, just for parity, they do the stats off the Lustrous Razor and the same substats for most characters. Characters that don't need energy regen, such as Encore, doesn't do energy regen. They just do more attack percent. But they're on Cosmic Ripples, stuff like this. We are also looking at a CN tier list, and something that was glaring about the CN tier list was that Encore and Sanhua were considered tier 0 above Gion. Okay, I'm going to have to pull this up. CN tier list WUA. Once it loads, right here. Okay, we gotta look at this. They are mathing Encore as the best DPS in the game without signature weapon. This being when it was only Gion, there was no Yinlin. Gion without signature weapon, the same weapon that Kalcharo would use, right? The attack percent one, standard banner, is 2.49 DPS. Add 1,000 to that. It's essentially 24,000 DPS, how they were calculating it. Encore being at 2.95 with Sanhua and Verena, that team, that hot SWAT team in CN is considered the single best team in the game at the time of Gion's release. Except that Gion with his signature weapon had better DPS output, but had to have that signature weapon on him. Right? So this shows the different values in calcs for CN because they're calcing non-signature and signature, which is really important, right? The way that Pride-Win is calcing is individual character DPS statistics, not so much teams, synergies, and etc. Now, there's no question Jinshi is probably the best DPS in the game right now. Obviously, her damage output's stupid when she hits it. Hint, hint, use a 4-4-1-1-1 build on her, get 100% crit rate. Thank me later. She can play with Yinlin and Verena. This is pretty much like the best team in the game. Jinshi, Yinlin, Verena. Fastest clear times, everything like that. But if you're not using Yinlin, because you're using Yinlin with Kalcharo, which we'll get to in a minute, you're going Jinshi, Yanwu, Verena. Because Yanwu is her best support outside of Yinlin. Now, without Yinlin, the Jinshi team deals about this much damage DPS, right? With Yinlin, you're adding this much DPS, go away ads, you're adding about this much DPS to the rotation because in the amount of time it takes for her to do her rotation and to get up on the field, set up her Forte circuit, leave, all the off-field damage is stacking without her having to take up time, so her DPS just stacks up massively. So Yinlin and Jinshi together are dealing about the same amount of damage on the comp. Without Yinlin, Jinshi deals about half the damage, right? Jinshi still being a very, very broken DPS on her own right. But as a team comp synergy, she likes Yinlin way more because Yinlin's dealing way more damage. Encore deals a lot of damage. I know her DPS isn't exactly amazing. Depends on your rotation. And they've got different rotations for her, right? They're using whatever is the best one for this DPS stat. Her rotation time for being 2 seconds less than Jinshi is about 10,000 DPS less, right? 10,000 DPS in 2 seconds, unfortunately, is 5,000 per second, which is a little bit more than it would make sense to be bringing her to 13.5 seconds. She still wouldn't quite be at Jinshi's level, right? On Cosmic Ripples. Now, Encore really likes Yinlin's weapon, which we'll get to in a minute. Yinlin also being calced off of Cosmic Ripples. We'll get to weapons in a minute. Jinshi likes Yinlin. Without Yinlin, Jinshi's still very good, but not nearly the best DPS comp in the game. Havoc Rover deals good DPS, but struggles to deal the best DPS in the game because there is no Havoc sub DPS at the moment. Once we get one, that will be very nice, right? Otherwise, Rover's kind of carrying, and you're using like Danjin and Taoshi for double or triple Dreamless comps for the echo damage and maybe some Danjin damage, but it's not a true sub DPS. You're still losing damage per time, right? Gion, on the other hand, with Mortefi, which he doesn't have to fight for Mortefi, basically, right? He's the only character that really uses Mortefi. Gion's damage alone is very strong. Very good. 33,000 DPS. Funnily enough, on par with Encore. It's about 1,000 DPS more, which makes sense with this CN tier list, that they are very similar, although they're calcing Encore much more aggressively and more complicated, because the way CN players play Encore is extraordinarily complicated, like swap cancel techs, right? Which Gion just cannot do. But for the typical player, Gion and Encore, very similar damage output, actually. At S0, of course. I mean, obviously at S6, it's different, limited unit. But at S0, they're very, very similar. Kalcharo, same thing, very similar DPS output. Kalcharo being the hardest to play, very, very similar DPS output. They all stay competitive with each other. Jinshi's the only one that's higher up, but she deals 0 damage outside of that window. And also, God forbid you don't crit it. Again, run 4-4-1-1-1 on her, get your crit rate to 100%. You need to crit her skill, or else you're losing drastic amounts of damage output. over the course of a fight. Unless you get lucky and crit repeatedly on a good medium built 4-3-3-1-1 build, you'll deal more damage, but you have to get lucky. Who wants to play to luck? Just build full crit rate. 100% crit rate for sure. So Jinshi has the best singular damage output, of course. When you factor in teammates, though, here's the issue. Jinshi likes Yinlin, but you're not going to play Yinlin with Jinshi all the time because you have a Kalcharo. You have a Zhangli Yao when he comes out. All these other characters, right? Yinlin's going to be taken by other teams. Jinshi gets access to the characters she likes. Yanwu and Taochi. Yanwu's rotation's quick as shit. Yanwu actually charges Jinshi up fully so fast it's ridiculous. But to get Taoshi's ultra buff, it takes a little bit. It takes a little bit longer of a rotation off field with very minimal damage to get Jinshi's maximum damage output, which is more than what's calculated here because you're getting the ultra buff and everything. But you're getting more DPS because you're hitting much, much harder damage-wise on rotation. So she's very strong should you crit, right? Everything goes well, everything goes right. Jinshi's very strong. Her team is slow and her teammates don't deal a lot of damage, so they don't make up for her DPS very well. Jian, though, gets a big boost to DPS with Mortefi, and it's pretty quick. Mortefi is very fast. So on Jian's downtime, instead of being on the field doing whatever, he switches to Mortefi. And Mortefi does his thing. And Mortefi's okay damage, right? Switches back to Jian. And now Mortefi's dealing off-field damage per second. A good amount of it with his ult. While Jian's ulting in the burst window. For an effective more damage output. For the time invested, right? If you're going to invest that time and your ult's going to last 12, 14, 16 seconds, whatever it lasts, and Mortefi's thing's going to keep going and going and going, and you're just going to keep dealing damage for that amount of time. With a similarly built Jian to a Jinshi, Jian is going to pretty much out DPS per rotation Jinshi. Jinshi will have much higher burst damage output. Jian will actually be able to clear stuff faster because his rotation's faster and his damage output is pretty comparable with the rotation, all things considered. And how long it lasts, right? Encore, same thing with Sanhua. Encore stays very competitive in DPS to Jian and Kalcharo with Sanhua and the right rotation. Same with Kalcharo with Yinlin. Now, I do need to specify Yinlin is the best character in the entire game right now. Because everybody else aside, Yinlin gives so much value to any team she's on because her off-field damage is so high, so ridiculously high, that she kind of just works in any team as a damage stick. She's that good. Her DPS is as good as all of these other main damage dealers while the main damage dealers are doing their damage. She's keeping up and dealing very, very, very good damage with them for no time investment. Go away, add. But it's insane. It's insane, right? Yinlin's broken. So mathematically with teams, okay, this tier list is not correct. With teams, Kalcharo and Yinlin are tier 0. It's probably the single best team in the game because Yinlin buffs Kalcharo to far surpass Jian and Encore because it's a 20% Electro deepen, 25% ult deepen. Those are two separate deepens. They do way more than a 30% or 38% deepen from a Mortefi, from a Taoshi, from whoever. Sanhua, right? Way, way bigger boost to Kalcharo. So Kalcharo's damage with Yinlin's outro is tier 0. The best damage dealer in the game. As well as Yinlin dealing damage. It is the best team in the game. Alright, it is the hardest team in the game to play. It is the best team in the game still. Right? Jian with Mortefi is going to be the next best team. Encore and Sanhua are going to be the next best team. Jinshi is the 4th best DPS in the game. She's the most free-to-play DPS in the game because Yanwu you get for free, then you just need literally any support. Taoshi, Varina, Baijo works too, anybody, right? And she works fine. She's the most free-to-play DPS in the game at the moment for a limited character. or 5-star character in general, right? Most free to play team. She struggles to contend with the damage output because her team is bad. Her team is free to play and it works, but it is inherently subpar compared to these other characters. With Jeji coming out, Jeji being considered possibly Jinshi's best sub DPS support could change things drastically. If Jeji's got good off-field DPS like Yinlin does, so, builds Jinshi quicker, stuff could happen, right? Jinshi with Yinlin is the best team in the game because Yinlin's damage output while Jinshi's doing rotation makes up for the loss because Yinlin's broken. But she isn't exactly gaining anything direct from Yinlin. Yinlin's literally a damage stick, so I can't even in good conscience say that that is the best team in the game because realistically, it's not. It's just two of the best DPSs thrown together, right? If we're trying to do team synergy, if we're just trying to take every main character with their idealized sub DPS without sharing, Calcharo Yinlin is the best team in the game. Jian Mortefi is going to be next. Encore Sanhua is going to be next. And then Jinshi and Yanwu will be last because Yanwu deals practically no damage, has no outro buff, no feasible buffs for her. You have to run a support to buff her. Yanwu's just there to stack stacks. So you can even say Baizhi or Varina, but it still does not matter because it's still not nearly as much of a buff as these other characters are getting from their idealized sub DPSs. Now, Jeji could be a 38% skill damage deepen sub DPS that does coordinated attacks, and that's faster than Taoshi. That would make Jinshi probably the best team in the game because fast coordinated attack generation was Jeji, and Jeji deepens. That is the 2-character core that makes Jinshi broken. Right now, the two character core, Jinshi is not the best. Not even particularly close. Especially, again, if you do not crit, because a lot of these damage stats are critting. They're critting. This is properly crit numbers ran, right? Which is why they're super duper high. So, overall, what this tier list should look more like is Mortefi also being tier 0 and Sanhua being tier 0 and Calcharo being tier 0 and Encore being tier 0 because together they are the best in the game. Now, when you get to limited weapons, things change a bit. Calcharo does not benefit from a limited weapon currently. This means that Jian actually does have the opportunity to surpass Calcharo in damage because one of them, Jian's limited weapon is very, very good on him. However, Yinlin's limited weapon makes up that damage difference on the Calcharo team, keeping them still very, very competitive because Yinlin's weapon is absolutely ridiculously broken. In fact, it's so broken that you put it on Encore, and Encore now competes in damage output as Jian with his limited weapon. So with limited weapons, honestly, the gap gets even closer. Right? Calcharo Yinlin being by far the best team. Now Jian is keeping up. Yinlin's stronger, right? Off-field damage, great. But it's not as much of a boost as Jian is getting or as Encore is getting from the limited weapons. They are all keeping up. Jinshi with her limited weapon, again, means her burst damage is absurd. She has the quickest boss kills if you crit and you are hitting hard enough to basically chunk the boss really, really hard in minimal rotations, ideally 2 to 3 kills the enemy, right? However, the more and more rotations you have to take, the worse and worse Jinshi gets compared to all these characters because her rotations are the most important and also slowest. Because she has to get her stacks, right? Jian doesn't care, Calcharo doesn't care, Encore doesn't care. They don't care so much about their rotation as just their sub DPS getting their outro skill buff, maybe Heron buff, and then going nuts. Jinshi has to get her stacks and then still has to do her entire rotation to get the damage output. So again, 100% crit rate, Jinshi, and with Yanwu, fast charge, but still you're losing a lot of damage not having a sub DPS that either deals damage or buffs you. So, the tier lists currently in global are kind of wrong. The old CN tier lists are a lot more accurate to the actual power level of the characters in the game. Kalcharo, once Yinlin releases, jumps up to tier 0 because he becomes the best DPS in the game with Yinlin's buffs, which is what is being calculated. Encore with Sanhwa's buffs, Jian with Mortefi's buffs, all of these characters with all these buffs, that's what's being calculated here. They still stay very tight, but Kalcharo actually gets such a massive bonus from Yinlin that he spikes through the roof. Encore with Changli outro may also spike through the roof because Changli's outro is the same thing, but it's fusion damage and skill damage, not electro damage and ult damage. So swap cancel build, which this is the way CN plays Encore. Instead of the ult damage, like hyper carry main damage dealer, they play a quick swap canceling Encore skill comp, where you use Encore's skill for most all of her damage output, that and her forte, heavy attack, right? Changli's outro may very well make Encore actually be competitive with Kalcharo team, with Yinlin, because that outro boost is just that drastically stronger than Mortefi's, Taoshi's, all these characters. Jian basically falling behind, other than the fact that Mortefi dealing damage while he's on field doing his thing, and especially with a higher sequence Mortefi, keeps up pretty well. Now, obviously, if we start getting into sequences, Mortefi at S, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 makes Jian team a lot better. And we're not going to calculate sequences for the 5 stars because that's just overkill, because Yinlin trivializes everything at S3, doubling her off-field damage. Just outright, the scaling doubles, basically. It gets stupid. But for the 4 stars, it changes a lot. I think Sanhua S6 helps Encore a little bit. Not a lot, though. Yinlin S3 is broken. S2 makes her charge quicker. S3 makes her hit twice as hard. S4 gives an attack boost. So we're not counting that, because otherwise it's Yinlin Kalcharo all day. Literally all day, Yinlin Kalcharo is the best team in the game with Yinlin sequences. No one else's sequences even matter 1 through 4 like that until you get to sequence 6 on Jinshi, where she skyrockets to becoming the best DPS in the game, because her scaling's practically double as well on every stack. It's absurd what her S6 does. Jian stays kind of close, but a lot of Jian's power spikes is coming from Mortefi's outro, and then also his weapon being very, very, very well suited for him. His sequences give a lot of buffs, but not nearly anything like S6 Jinshi, so he keeps up overall with all his sequences, but he doesn't quite have the damage output Jinshi does if Jinshi's on a fast rotating team, which he does not have currently, right? So team comp wise, which is how CN likes to calculate their tier lists, realistically, all of these DPSs, these 4 right here, should be tier 0. Havoc Rover is tier 0.5 because they don't have a Havoc sub DPS, and Jinshi's only still tier 0 because A, you can run her with Yinlin, which is the best team in the game at the moment, or if you don't run her with Yinlin, she still has enough damage to carry her own weight with Yanwu. It's pretty broken character. Once she gets an actual good sub DPS for herself, Jeji possibly, it will be a big difference. It will be a big, big difference, and Jinshi will begin to start feeling more of the power creep. But right now, Jian's considered stronger than Jinshi in most content. In fact, Kalcharo Yinlin is considered stronger than Jinshi in most content, and so is Encore Sanhua in most content. They are much more flexible. They have teams that support them better. Their damage output all being very similar anyways, before limited weapons and after limited weapons, although Kalcharo falls off a little bit, Yinlin makes up for it. They stay very, very competitive. There isn't really particularly any power creep in the game right now until we see a sub DPS that buffs Jinshi enough to where it is basically that 2 core team instead of Jinshi having to have a support for the deepen, which slows the team down, slows the rotation down, and makes it more difficult to build, essentially. Other than that, once we start getting S6, S1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 4 stars, as well. A lot of these characters jump up. I think S2 and S3 Mortefi brings him to tier 0 because he gets a longer damage window off of his ult, as well as being able to buff characters that use skills such as Danjin, basically becoming Danjin's best support, funnily enough. Danjin by S6 becomes probably tier 0 DPS. She actually can solo clear the entire middle stage of the TOA, both bosses by herself, with proper investment at S6 at level 80, because she's just that broken. Her stats are actually that great at S6. The amount of buffs she gets is absurd. A lot of these characters honestly jump up at higher sequence levels. Baizha gets better, right? Not counting 5-star sequence levels, because again, that's like pay to win shit. Baizha probably jumps up to tier 0.5. You get the revive mechanic that Verena does, as well as a bunch of other buffs. More healing, more damage output. She becomes a lot better. Better energy generation on S1 is one of her most important ones for a faster rotation as well. Makes her much, much better. Yang gets much, much better, probably jumps up to tier 1. Taoshi gets much, much better, probably jumps up to tier 2. Chixia gets actually just as strong at S5 as S0 Encore is. Obviously, with Yinlin's weapon, Encore is better. And with Sanhua, Encore is better. But 1-for-1, Chixia has better solo clears because she has a more... her kit has higher uptime. So, again, like soloing bosses, Chixia turns to tier 0.5. Right? Lots of characters jump up. But still, these 4 characters stay tier 0, and their respective teams stay tier 0. So before anyone's like, oh, Jinshi and Gion are tier 0, why build Kalcharo and Encore because these two deal more damage than these 3? That's not true, because you have to think about the team. The best team in the game is still Kalcharo Yinlin. It is still the best team in the game, because Yinlin is the best buffer and the best damage dealer, and it's broken. Kalcharo with Yinlin and Jinshi's weapon. So this is something that, well, I have it pulled up here. This is something that Pridewind has yet to update. Last I checked, which I believe was literally last night, they have not updated it. Right? It's such a marginal decrease on the Verdant Summit that if you had this instead of the Lustrous Razor for whatever reason, yeah, it's fine. S5 Autumn Trace too. Like you're not losing much damage versus Yinlin gaining, you know, so much from her limited weapon. So much from her limited weapon. Jinshi's limited weapon, however, I do not think is going to be better on Kalcharo. Its crit rate, skill damage bonus, and damage percent to all stats for like 12% to all element stats, right? So the problem is most of Kalcharo's kit is ult damage bonus related, not skill. So the Ages of Harvest would, in fact, actually be slightly worse than the Verdant Summit, simply because I don't think it's called a Death Messenger when he's in his ultimate. I'm not a Kalcharo player yet. I'm learning him, right? But whatever his heavy attack is called, he gets a better boost from the heavy attack damage increase from the Verdant Summit than he would from Jinshi's Ages of Harvest. This weapon is most likely worse on Kalcharo. So Kalcharo, I mean, again, it's like the Lustrous Razor is made for him. High base attack, attack percent, energy regen, which is nice because he likes to ult more, as well as ult damage bonus percent, which ramps up when you use your skills. It is made for Kalcharo. It is basically his banner weapon, and it is broken on him. Drastically so. Very, very strong. Nothing beats out the Lustrous Razor for him. I'm assuming Ages of Harvest is actually going to be a little bit under the Autumn Trace, because he can use Autumn Trace's buff as well, and cannot use Age of Harvest's buff whatsoever. So I think the Autumn Trace actually gives him better stats. But regardless, you could have a S1 Autumn Trace, you could have a S1 Helios Cleaver. Him and Yinlin is still going to be essentially the best team in the game. Because, yeah, he deals 80% of the damage, but there's a Yinlin on the team. And that damage output that she deals makes up for so much. So much damage output she makes up for. Kalcharo with K, not CH. Well, a lot of people just call him Kakurato instead of Kalcharo or Kalkaro, right? A lot of people just call him Kakurato because I think that was his beta name, was like Kakarot. Kakaroto, something like that. Goku, pretty much. Gojo. I mean, he's got lots of names. It's a pretty memeable character, but he is the best DPS in the game. And people keep being like, oh, he's getting, like, Gion power crept him, all this stuff. It's like, nah, he didn't get power crept for shit. He's still the best DPS. He's just by far and away the hardest motherfucker to play. The reason why he's the hardest character to play too is not only, like, this damage output is this, right? Which you deal 2/3 of if you don't do the 3 DM combo. So if you are playing him like not a good player, straight up, he's not the best DPS. Yinlin has to carry his ass if you are not able to do the 3 DM combo. And Yinlin does not deal enough damage output, even with Kalcharo, to make up for that damage. We can math it per rotation pretty much as 389,000, so 390,000 plus Yinlin at S0 for 219,000 puts him at 610,000 DPS. 610,000 DPS. Encore is 368,000. Sanhua is like barely 100,000. I actually don't think she even breaks that on her rotation. So Encore is less damage on that team with Sanhua. But Sanhua's buffing Encore's damage, but Yinlin's buffing Kalcharo's damage more, right? And then Gion's the same thing, 407,000 plus Morteffi's dealing about 100,000 some odd, right? Jinshi is the only one that can even argue to keep up with her own DPS stats, and it's still less than just adding S0 Yinlin and S0 Kalcharo together, even with the damage loss, 277,000 plus 219,000, it's going to be almost 500,000 damage. So it almost keeps up with Jinshi alone. But again, Yinlin outroing for Kalcharo increases his damage considerably, enough that this is going to go up by not 45%, but it's closer to like a 60% damage increase on like most of his rotation. So this jumps up to about 400,000 or so. This will jump up to like 600,000. It's a big increase. No, this will be like 450,000 almost, and this will be almost 700,000 damage overall in his rotation with Yinlin outro, because it's that broken. So he is the best in the game. He is the best in the game by a lot, and I'm actually going to learn him and build him. My Yinlin pieces are going to go onto him, and I'm going to move my Yinlin over to Moonlit set just because Kalcharo is that good, and also Yinlin is just a sub DPS at this point for every team I use. But yeah, that is why tier lists in this game, at least global tier lists, are inherently wrong. And as global players, as with every gacha game, we should listen to the CN player base because they're actually just better than us for whatever fucking reason. They latch themselves onto gacha games and just decide to create the meta, and they are just better. So we need to get the CN calculators on Pridewind's team and start getting some like actual tiers based on like the idealized team. Like Sanhwa's free, so Encore should be tier 0 and so should Sanhwa, because they are literally both free characters you can get. They're both free. You have a ticket and a selector for Encore, and Sanhwa's free. So that is like literally the best free to play team in the game. Another character I plan to build, she's going to share Changli's echoes. But yeah, that's it pretty much. Play whatever DPS you want. They get better with sub DPSs. Don't pull main DPSs as much. Pull sub DPSs like Jeji. They're going to be much more valuable in the long term. Peace.